The hunted have become the hunters, General. This is
Yeah.
a post up on your Substack here. I want to just simply give you the floor. We had Sean Davis of the Federalist explaining his new article about you being targeted by Susan Rice, and so many of these emails are now showing that Obama was obsessed with you, General, and his entire team was needing to take you out as enemy number one. It seems like this is the purpose of this article. A righteous moment for you, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, incredible. I think the quote of the day goes to Sean on, I wrote it down. I think he said Django on horse tranks. I mean, that might be the quote of the month. Talking about Hillary Clinton, Django on horse tranks. Unbelievable, huh? What we've learned. And in that exposure, just a touch on that point, because I think that Sean was righteous and fair in the last segment. They are talking about the direction that a legal, a DOJ strike force should go after those that were serving in government, where he's not giving her a pass because the two courts that exist, the court of public opinion, and then the court of law. But Hillary, they knew obviously from the exposure of this information. This is the adversaries have a file on all of us, and clearly on Hillary. They knew exactly what was going on, and everybody here in America was speculating, but actually the Russians, the Chinese, all of our adversaries, even countries in Europe, all knew about her health status, and they would take advantage of it. Never mind all the other kinds of nefarious things that Hillary Clinton was involved in. So but today I posted on X, and people can go to @JenFlynn and read it. The hunters, or the hunted have become the hunters. What this really comes down to is what we are seeing, and I won't go into the who should be prosecuted, how it's going to be prosecuted, all the stuff that the DOJ and from Pam, Cash, Dan, and others, the White House counsel and others are going to be working on. But what we are beginning to see is we're seeing a very, very evil, dark underbelly of the American establishment, political establishment, and it took a turn for the worse. Really, probably going back 30 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 70, depending on the historians that are actually following what has been happening to the United States of America, and those that really, really look at the backside of what we are beginning to see. But let's just take it back to the days of Barack Obama, where when he did talk about the fundamental transformation of America. I mean, this is a very serious thing that he wanted to do, and I've said this on your show before. The plan, and I've written about this. In fact, I still think it's my pinned post is the overall strategic deep state plan was 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary, and the Benny Johnson show, God forbid, would not be around. Right. And people like me, wouldn't be around either. So in there, I talk about in today's Substack, I talk about how things have turned around dramatically, and I think one of the things that Sean did highlight, and I think it's smart, and I think and other smart legal analysts have talked about this, is to use and leverage what the left has done to Donald J. Trump in order to take advantage going forward of who does need to be held to account. And there are going to have to be people held to account. One of the things that I know for a fact, that because I spoke to Trump about this early on in the 2016, post the election of 2016, and early on at that time, and then into 2017, we talked about the spying, the ongoing spying, the speculation, right? I mean, these people are spying on us, right? We also talked about the things that we didn't know. I mean, I knew a lot about the government at the time, particularly about the intel community. That's why they went after me so hard. That's very clear. I mean, and now people ask me, why aren't I in the government? Well, maybe, I'm not in the government, but I can tell you, Benny, and for your audience, trust me, that I am far more effective on the outside right now because of all the things that people are beginning to see. So guiding, cajoling, counseling, influencing, advising on some of these things that we are beginning to see. They don't come just because, somebody sprinkled fairy dust and poof, they exist. Because I can tell you, those that are inside of the intel community, particularly the intelligence community, and some over at the State Department, but they are fighting tooth and nail to keep this stuff hidden still to this day. Because in 6 months' time, with President, Donald J. Trump 2.0, not just 47, but 2.0, and that's part of what my message is in this article today, is that this is a renewed, refreshed Donald J. Trump. This is not Donald J. Trump 45. This is Donald J. Trump 47. And he knows that when he starts to think about what happened in his first administration and what happened during those 4 years in between, and then now where he's at 6 months into it, he knows that his legacy will be sort of judged historically based on a couple of things. One is to give the United States of America something, and essentially that something is sufficient time to overcome this burden of corruption that we are all experiencing and is being exposed. He's going to have to take some dramatic steps, and he's going to have to drive some of what the Department of Justice is going to have to do. Whereas when he was the president 45 1.0, you would, if you go back and you look at a lot of things, because I paid very close attention because I was in the middle of being persecuted during that time. Trump would say, "We'll see what happens. If I could shut the Mueller, I can shut the Mueller investigation down, whenever I want to, but I won't. I'm gonna let this thing play out." Now Trump is in a much different and a much stronger position. So his stance, like the stance of a really solid lineman on the Super Bowl team, is much stronger than it was during his 45th presidency. And that's because, go ahead, Benny.
Oh, no, please finish your thought. That's because of what?
Well, that's because Trump, during that time, he really did not know the ways of Washington, D.C. And I don't think he realized then, I really don't, that he was not only the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States, he's also the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America, not the attorney general. Yes. President Trump is. And that's what he has learned. And I'm witnessing that in many of the things that he's saying publicly, and what he's doing he's doing a superb job being very transparent. And I think we're going to see even a greater level of transparency. That knowledge of Donald J. Trump as the chief law enforcement officer for the United States of America is much stronger. And I can tell that just in some of the things that he is doing, never mind what I think that he really learned that lesson during Trump 1.0. And that's a powerful, powerful place for him to be, a place that he never thought that he would be. And many on the left, in fact, the entire left was trying to not allow him to come back into the political fray, which he did. All those 4 years while he was being persecuted, they went down to Mar-a-Lago with orders to shoot to kill if necessary. So, Trump has learned a lot, and we America are in a much stronger position right now because of that.
You say, General, that President Trump was ill-informed and ill-advised and didn't understand his complete role constitutionally in his first term. But that's because you weren't there, General. That's because they sabotaged you by his side, and you were his top advisor. We have now the proof. We've said it on the show before, but of course now we have it in writing. It's a lot worse. The declassified email shows that Susan Rice noted, and here is the document itself on screen, to Obama and Comey agreeing to hide the Russia hoax investigation from Flynn. It's a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy as much against Trump as it was against the people who were supporting him. You, General, they viewed you as enemy number one. Why did they view you as enemy number one? And one other little, I think, important thing that blew us away last week as we were digging into this is that Donald Trump gets the president's daily brief too when he's the president-elect. And so you were getting those briefs with Donald Trump. They pulled the brief that would have completely blown away any hoax there on December 9th. They stopped that brief because Trump would have gotten it too. It wasn't just Obama getting briefed. It was you too. You would have gotten the information that there was no Russia hoax. They pulled it away from you, which is, I think, astonishing, General.
It is astonishing. And, to take kind of a little bit of a timeline, walking down memory lane here for people, for your audience. Remember, Obama and Trump met, and Obama tells Trump, don't hire Flynn, right? In addition to, saying, be careful of Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, right? So he tells him that. Then immediately after, and Trump and I talked about that conversation and had a good laugh about it. And then Trump hires me as a national security advisor. Once I was hired as a national security advisor, it didn't require Senate confirmation. It's a direct appointment. Then all of a sudden they now know that. So he goes against what the previous president's advice was. And then we see the 8 December meeting in the Oval Office, which is really important. So this is a really critical piece of evidence that I was not aware of, Benny, and now we've learned about this in this exposure of more evidence. That 8 December meeting is where they talked about we can't have this intelligence going into the PDB. So the PDB was pulled that day. First time, I think. I mean, I've been in the intel community and I've gotten the PDB many times over my career. And as the DIA director, I got it on a daily basis. As a national security advisor, I was getting it every day. That when I look back, that was pulled that day on the 9th of December. And then you see a bunch of different events occur. The next major event, and that gets back to this newly released evidence from Susan Rice, what you just showed, is another one where on the 5th of January, and I've known about this because this did come out in my case where, which was eventually dismissed. On the 5th of January in the Oval Office again, this is why I think that there was the conspiracy component of this was once Trump won, they had this meeting on the 8th of December, and then they had a follow-up meeting on the 5th of January in 2017. And on the 5th of January is when they really cemented the conspiracy. This is when they said, okay, we now have to get Flynn out of the way because Trump didn't do what I asked him to do, thank God. And in order to get Trump out of the way, we've got to get Flynn out of the way. So that was another component of the conspiracy, and that's hard evidence right there. We now have even more from Susan Rice, more exposing of her emails. Then on the day of the inauguration, Susan Rice puts out the very famous email, "Do everything by the book." Lisa Monaco's name, which is another name, I don't think Sean brought that up in the last segment. Lisa Monaco was the deputy to Susan Rice on the national security staff during Obama. She was actually the Homeland Security advisor and deputy to Susan Rice. I met with Susan Rice and Lisa Monaco multiple times during the transition in 2016. They sat right across the desk like I'm speaking to you right now, only physically in a room. I met with them multiple times. Lisa Monaco eventually became the deputy attorney general under the Biden administration. She kept this thing going, with the likes of Garland, who didn't know what he was doing. So now we have the 5th of January, 2017, to take us back to memory lane. And then the famous email from Susan Rice on the day of the inauguration for Trump. And then between that time, 5 January, and I think it was either 20 or 21 January, 2017, the very famous David Ignatius article from the Washington Post comes out, which was a leak. We call it the kill shot. We have evidence where Jim Clapper, actually, after a meeting between me and Susan Rice, Jim Clapper then calls up David Ignatius and says, okay, take the kill shot, right? Which means now we're going to leverage the media to get the media, message out there. Because remember, alternative media didn't exist at that time, so we couldn't fight back, right? So now the Washington Post puts out this information about Flynn violated the Logan Act, right? And that came out of Biden's mouth during the 5 January timeframe, right? The meeting. So this sort of walk down memory lane, and trust me, on the strike force, because they know this. I mean, I'm don't worry about what I'm doing, folks. Worry about what the people that are in the midst of this conspiracy, they need to worry about lawyering up. But that is when David Ignatius put out the very famous article. We have 9 sources in the intelligence community that said this is what Flynn talked about with the Russian ambassador. And then they started working on the vice president of the United States office. Okay. And that's Pence. And I write about this in my book, pardon of innocence. I also talk about it in my film, Flynn, delivering the truth, whatever the cost. So that article comes out. Then there's just this firestorm of media, right, that comes out for that whole period of time, and extraordinary amounts of pressure. And then a little bit further on into the administration, so around the 11th or 12th of February, which was just days before I end up resigning, Andy McCabe, right, Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director of the FBI, and Sally Yates, Acting Attorney General for the United States, Mary McCord, who are some other names involved in this. Mary McCord, who's the head of the National Security Division for the Department of Justice. They then go over to the White House and they met with Reince Priebus and Vice President Pence. And I've said this very publicly, and I've said it in both the movie and the book. You know, I read about this in detail. I won't go into the details of it, but just to say that from that meeting, I got a call right after that meeting and said, hey, I just looked at a document that said you talked about sanctions. And to this day, I've never talked about sanctions, never spoke about sanctions with the Russian ambassador. The transcripts of that conversation are in fact public. We talked about expulsions and we talked about staying out of war. I mean, because the one thing that people have lost sight of is that this conspiracy to undermine a duly elected president could have brought us to World War III. That's how dangerous this thing was. And they didn't care. What they cared about was undermining President-elect Donald J. Trump and then President Donald J. Trump. Because once I resigned, there was nobody around his inner circle that really understood all of the things that I understand about not only the intelligence community, but, you know, our Defense Department, our State Department, and how all of it comes together. That's why I was brought in to be the national security advisor. The last thing I'd say, Benny, on this point, on the sort of walk down memory lane, a couple of months later, so I'm out of there. Now we've got Jeff Sessions is out, right? He had to recuse himself, and then he was out. You got Rod Rosenstein, who's now the acting attorney general. And then there was conversations about March, April timeframe about the 25th Amendment, enacting the 25th Amendment. I mean, these people so desperately wanted Donald Trump out of office. They didn't want him to win in 2016, and they wanted him out. They used multiple times to try to get him to say, screw this, I'm done with this Washington, D.C. garbage. And then they brought in the 25th Amendment. And everybody needs to be reminded about the 25th Amendment issue, which was to get some number of his own cabinet to say, yeah, he's not capable of being the commander in chief and being the president of the United States. That was in the springtime. Once they realized that didn't work, in enters Mueller, right? In enters the Mueller investigation. And once the Mueller investigation began, this is where I don't think Donald Trump understood clearly at that time his role as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America. Because I feel, and I've had conversations about it, but I felt at that time, looking back, that he believed that, well, Mueller's going to come in, he's going to find out that this is all a big, bunch of BS, a big hoax, and it's going to go away. Oh, no. And Donald Trump was told after I resigned, and I know this, he was told after I resigned because he thought, well, maybe this Russia thing will go away now that Flynn's out of here, because that's what people around him were telling him. And I know who those people are, and I've written about some of this in my book. When he was told that, when they had that conversation, one person in the room said, oh, no, this is just the beginning. Now that Flynn's out of here, we're in big trouble here. And that's exactly what happened. And here we are. That was early 2017. Okay. Now we are in mid 2025, and the coup d'etat against the United States of America, against a duly elected president again, is still underway. And the deep state has not been brought to heel yet. It will only be brought to heel when serious senior people are held to account. And as we've seen in the last 24 hours, we see, like my friend Rush Limbaugh used to say, Peter Strzok struck stroke. He used to joke about the guy's name. Peter Strzok has deleted all of his all of his posts from X, right? And I even found out early this morning that even the Wayback Machine has been deleted. Well, Peter, too bad, because we have the most important text messages that you sent to your lover and lawyer of the FBI, Lisa Page. We have the most important ones. And the most important one is, if he wins, we have an insurance policy, right? If he wins, we have an insurance policy. Well, guess what, Benny and your audience? The insurance policy is what we are now seeing in black and white. And to me, this is so egregious. I'm not a lawyer. I should have an honorary law degree with all the crap that I've been through. But I'm just telling you that I know that there are people that are looking hard at this right now. And again, and I'll finish with this, there are two courts. There's a court of public opinion, which is going to destroy these people, and rightly so. And then there's a court of law. And that's where the real, the rubber is going to meet the road. The court of public opinion, in my estimate, is most important right now, because we have to retain the power that the GOP has in our government right now as we go into 2026. Right? I'm not worried about 2028 yet. I'm worried about 2026. And I want, because I'm gonna go on my own, political tear here between now and that election, because that election is going to be another bellwether. And frankly, those midterm elections, the turnouts are low. And this coup is not over. And the people that are going to have to fight against those that need to be held accountable, there's going to be a give and take here. And it has to be, because we have to follow a fair rule of law, and we have to have a justice system. But we don't need to go and dig up more evidence, right? We don't need to go dig up more evidence. Yeah, there's the Trump's not going to become president, right? That's Lisa Page, the number 2 lawyer at the FBI, by the way, not just his pillow partner. And he says, no, he's not. We'll stop it. And then he goes into, we have an insurance policy. So, I mean, we have all this stuff. I mean, most of it was published in my case, which eventually was dismissed. So, anyway, I'll stop there, Benny, because I know you got other great guests coming on and your audience.
I just wanted to, again, this information is fascinating and rightly posited. We've put up all of the evidence on screen as the general is talking through it. Now, that is the past. The past is prologue to something new that's about to happen. And you just posted about it. And I can't wrap this interview, General, without getting to this, the John Solomon reporting that you have promoted this morning, saying something big is about to happen. We think we've seen the full rodeo. You haven't seen anything yet. You said more accountability is coming soon. John Solomon reporting that there are going to be some massive bombshells declassified in the next 48 hours by the CIA director. They'll have to do with Crossfire Hurricane and Hillary Clinton. Please, General, in closing here, can you frame this for us? What are we about to see?
Yeah, so 2 things, and there's still a lot of internal undermining within the CIA that has to end. The exposure, though, that I think we're about to see is additional exposure of the current evidence that we are seeing with the undermining in the 2016, 2017 timeframe. And I think the big one that's going to come out, and I think it's going to be even worse, is 2020. So 2020 was the coup, as I've said very bluntly. The plan initially was Obama, Hillary, but that got stopped by Trump, right, and the American people. And so then they had to figure out how to do it again. And the real coup was 2020. And I think that, I wouldn't expect something in the next 24 hours, because I think that there's some machinations going on inside of the government right now. But I think a lot of what we're going to learn in leading up to 2020 is the coup. And remember, President Trump was the president at that time, right? The 51 it's intel and defense advisors that signed the Hunter Biden letter. I mean, that's public now. There's a lot of other things that are not public that led up to 2020 that led to the coup and the rigged election where Uncle Joe became the president of the United States. And God, look at what we're learning about the auto pen, right? So more to come. That's where I think, if you want to put a finger on what's next, it's that.
Wow. So that would be, President Trump wasn't necessarily in power. He was the president-elect. But you're talking about the 2020 election where
Right.
it's sedition against the actual elected president in office.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. I mean,
bombshell, General.
it really is. I mean, to me, that's it, everything that happened to me and to Trump and to the country, we're now seeing that. Now it's how they then decided, once they couldn't get him to get out 25th Amendment or whatever, or just to say screw it, you Pence, you can have it. When they couldn't do that, they had to figure out another way to do it. And the 2020 election is going to be, I think, the real revelation that we, as the world, and then certainly the American people, are going to see. And to me, that is going to then allow President Trump to make some decisions about how our elections will be conducted. That's the real story here.
Fascinating. So they're going to use this then as a predicate. He's already signed the executive order to secure the elections. They're going to use this as an example of how subterfuge can happen from inside of the system to rig elections against presidents.
Absolutely. And that's not just here in the United States of America. That's worldwide.
General, that's bombshell stuff. Thank you for framing that up for us. We will be on the lookout. Obviously, you should be on the lookout. Here's General Flynn's book, an absolute must read right now if you want to understand what's happening in your country. It's called Pardon of Innocence. You can get it right here on Amazon, and it has a nearly 5-star rating that you barely ever find on Amazon. #1 bestseller. General Flynn on social media, he's followed by millions. You should be one of them, obviously, here at General Mike Flynn on X. And his Substack, we've already put up the article today. Thank you, General, so much for your time.
Thanks, Benny. God bless.
Godspeed.